thanks, Jim, and thanks for coming along tonight to hear what we're saying. A friend of mine, he uses a very simple question to get people talking about the referendum. What he asks is this as good as it gets? And he then goes on to say that, well, if it is, we might as well just all go to the bar and then go home. The belief is, well, actually, it's not as good as it gets. If you're brave enough to switch on the television and listen to the news, you might think that the UK economy is starting to pick up and we're post-recession and everything's starting to look a bit rosier. As soon as you scrape underneath the surface, what you find is that in comparison with the other developed industrial nations of the world, the UK has one of the worst levels of productivity out of any of those countries. It's one of only two of the OECD countries that's seen its productivity levels drop in the last 30 years. The French dropped by about 4% and the UK by about 32%. We've got one of the worst balance of trade figures in the world. We've got the 8th largest differential in the earning power between men and women. We've got the highest rates of disabled poor. We've got an appalling record on child poverty. 1 in 4 children in Scotland is going to be brought up in poverty. We are the 2nd lowest paid of all of the developed countries. And of our European neighbours, only Lithuania manages to have less in the way of industrial democracy. That's the workers' ability to shape their workplace. So what does that mean? It means that we end up with a low-pay economy. A low-pay economy, whilst the economy is growing at any rate, leads to increased levels of inequality. Effectively, it means that the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. There's been a lot of research done on what levels of inequality means for a country. What it results in is a lot of social problems. You end up with a situation where the higher the level of inequality in your country, the worse you do educationally, the worse you do in various health measures, the levels of obesity rates go up, diabetes rates go up, heart disease go up, teenage pregnancies go up. You score very badly in terms of the social integration in your society. You end up with people not paying enough into the tax system to be able to provide the sorts of public services that we require. What do I mean by low pay? In Scotland, it's commonly regarded that between £25,000 and £35,000 a year is what's regarded as a decent wage. Now, I'm not arguing whether it is or it isn't. Statistically, that's what's used to define a decent wage. 1 out of every 5 workers in Scotland falls into that bracket. 3 out of every 5 earn less than that, and more than half of the workers in Scotland earn less than £21,000 a year. If you put the Scottish workforce and gave them the levels of pay and the levels of employment that the Nordic countries have, and put that difference back into the UK tax system, you would raise an additional £4 billion a year that would go into the Scottish Government. Why are we a low-pay economy then? Well, for the last 40 or so years, there has been one predominant political doctrine in the UK. It's based on a conflict model and is based on allowing corporations and businesses the free rein to do what they will. What that results in, effectively, is that the big get bigger and the weak get crushed. The markets dictate. Now, in my lifetime, we've gone from having the traditional high street and the corner shop to Walmart, where the big got bigger and bigger and bigger, and the weak got crushed. It doesn't have to be like that. During the height of the recession, or as the Norwegians refer to it, 2009, their Prime Minister made a speech in which he said, if we want to build more, we must share more. Picture, if you will, 2 classrooms in a nursery school. And the teachers say, right, today kids, we're going to build, and we're going to build with Lego. In the first classroom, the big snotty faced kid shoves all the other ones out the way, goes to the Lego basket and grabs as much as they can. In their pockets, in their shirts, they're grabbing it, taking it away. In the other classroom, the kids go up, they take some Lego, they go back. Which of the classrooms builds more? Because I would argue it's the one where more hands are putting things together. The first room, that represents the UK economy. The game here is no longer about building things. The game in the UK is about having things, about getting things, collecting things, hoarding things. We're no longer building, we're hoarding. And unless you are the one who's got control of the hoard, you can't get access to those resources. How do we change it? The fundamental is that we have to reconnect our economic decisions, the decisions that our government makes on the economy. We need to reconnect that with the democracy of the country. Again, if you're listening to the news, you'll hear phrases like, the FTSE 100 share index fell today in reaction to the news that, or markets today closed down because of. The real news item is that the markets and the corporations and the banks don't get to vote. We get to vote. When was the last time you heard a news report saying that the people were unhappy because something was done or wasn't done? We need to get an industrial democracy that allows for the economic decisions that the government make to be based on what we need. And for most of us, that's relatively simple things. Very few. I mean, if you speak to a kid, they all want to be either Lionel Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo. We get that. But for most people, what they want is a decent job, a decent standard of living, a decent roof over their head, and a decently happy life. Most of us don't want too much out of it. So why is it that we have a government that isn't providing that? If you think you're walking down the street and you see an old dear and somebody's trying to steal her handbag, you've got 2 decisions. The first is that you can go and you can intervene, in which case you make it harder for the person to mug them. You can not intervene, you can walk on by. But walking on by isn't the neutral option. If you don't make it harder for something to happen, you make it easier for something to happen. And what we've got currently is a government that have a policy decision to walk on by and let the corporations and the banks mug us. That's what we've got to change. How do we change it? Well, one of the things that we can do is we can invest in the economy. This isn't new, it isn't revolutionary. We actually know how to create employment. It was done in the 20s, it was done in the 30s. If you go back to the Great Depression, the foremost economist at the time, a guy called John Maynard Keynes, he was asked, what do we do when we can't provide enough employment? He said, get one half of the population to dig a hole and the other half to dig it to fill it back in. Now, we at the Common Weal are not advocating that Scotland goes on a massive hole digging programme, but you can invest in things. You get people to work. We look at our railway system. Let's not tinker about the edges and upgrade it here and there. Let's electrify it. Let's rebuild it. Let's get people working, doing these jobs. Our broadband system. Let's not wait for it. Let's just go and do it. Look at the energy supply. There's currently experimental tidal power being used off Orkney. It's producing 5 times the level of electricity that the inventors thought it was going to do. So what do we have? We've got a government who wants to spend billions and billions of pounds buying nuclear missiles rather than investing in that. Well, let's get the money invested into there so that we create the work and the jobs that Scottish people can do and develop that will then be exported all over the world. This isn't difficult. We know how to do it. The problem that we've got is we have a government who is making a conscious decision not to. The other things that we can do is you can reduce your economy. In the Scotland Future, in the white paper, it talks a bit about childcare. The reason that childcare isn't getting picked up in the mainstream media is not because we don't care about kids, it's because the commentators know it's actually not about children, it's about the economy. The levels of re-engagement of women in this country after they've had kids is ridiculous. If you compare the UK and Norway, the level of re-engagement of women after they've had their children is worth more to the Norwegian economy than their oil. The question isn't, can we afford childcare? It's how can we afford not to do it? But we've got a government that doesn't want people engaging in the jobs market. They want low wage, low paid, low skilled work. They don't want this. And that's what we've got to undo. The third thing that we can do is we can invest. At the Common Weal, we're talking about a national investment bank where people can get access to the one thing that lets you create. They get access to money. If we tonight decided to start a business and you went to a bank, they're only going to ask one question: how much profit will you make? Well, the way to maximise your profit is to stop people doing things here and get some 12-year-old Chinese kid to make it and import it. What they should be asking is, how many jobs will it create? What's the economic impact for the whole of the country? What's the environmental impact? In Europe, there's, in Germany, the KfW Fortebank, they lend about 40 billion euros a year on housing projects. This isn't to shove little boxes, as many as possible, onto a building site, sell them and make as much money as you can. This is to build houses that people live in. They rent. They lend the money based on 25 or 30 years of rent coming in. That's what we should be thinking about. That's what we should be doing. Long-term investment in our country that creates jobs for tradesmen, people who are in that building, in the construction industry, in engineering. That's what we can do, and we can do that. We know how to do it. And the great thing about the sort of discussions that we're having around the referendum and around what we can do, Scotland's a very, very lucky place. We have got absolutely everything that we need here. Our natural resources, our land resources, and most importantly, our people. So in summary, we know what the problem is. We've got a low wage, low pay economy. We know what the solution is. You get people into high value, high quality, higher waged work. Then you pay into the tax system and we can afford the kind of public services that we want. We know what the problem is, we know what the solution is, and we know how to do it. The one thing that we need to do is remove the one barrier that stops us from doing this. Ladies and gentlemen, that's what I hope we're going to do on the 18th of September. Thank you.